Why are there different accents in the regions of Vietnam?
Why do Vietnamese have two wedding ceremonies?
Why do Vietnamese have French words?
Why is Vietnamese in Latin script?
Why do Vietnamese ride motorbikes?
You're listening to Why Do Vietnamese, a cultural podcast by VSAR.
Welcome to Why Do Vietnamese, Vietnamese Cultural Talks with VSAR. Each episode we pick a new topic on why do Vietnamese do this or that and share a little bit of our personal insight to the topic. We hope that through this podcast we can bring much more insight and provide a little bit of explanation to some of the many specific things in our culture. My name is Brian, VP of Culture at VSAR, and I will be your host for today. Joining me is my fellow VSAR member, Yvonne. Yvonne, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi everyone, I'm Yvonne. I am the Director of Corporate Relations for VSAR. I am in my third year of studying and I am very excited to be the first guest of our podcast.
Thank you so much for joining me today, Yvonne, in this episode. Now, before we get right into today's topic, we're going to have our V-Music feature, where we will share a bit of a song relating to each episode's topic. Now let's get right into it.
Có ai thoát được mình xa khỏi chân lý trong tình yêu, không thể cùng nhau suốt kiếp. Thế nhưng trái tim lại sẽ in sâu niềm đau suốt kiếp. Tình đã qua lâu nhưng ta cứ sống trong quá khứ, chứ khó quên được đâu. Chuyện buồn đôi ta đã hết, sao chẳng thể hết tàn tàn. Chỉ vì cố quên một người mà dần vắt đến nỗi thân tâm không ngừng héo úa.
Alright, so that song was Không thể cùng nhau suốt kiếp by the singer Hoa Minzy featuring Mr. Siro. Two pretty popular singers in Vietnam. Mr. Siro is known for writing pretty sad, really melancholy songs. And basically, Yvonne, I have a question for you.
Yes, shoot.
Why do you think, or I put this song in there? I don't know if you've seen the music video of this one yet.
No, I actually never heard of the song until now. Yeah, it's really sad, like a ballad. What is the significance?
Okay, so basically, if you've seen the music video of this one, it's actually, the theme is based on the last empress and the last king of Vietnam's monarchy in the early 1900s, or actually mid 1900s. So it tells the story of Nam Phuong Hoàng hậu, the last empress of Vietnam's imperial period. And it talks about how her kind of like a different side to it, giving her love story between her and the king. And it's kind of a sad story in real life and in the music video, which is why it's kind of like a sad theme. And the actual title actually means we won't be able to be together for this entire life. And that brings us to our actual topic of the Nguyê Dynasty. And our topic this week is, why do so many Vietnamese have the last name Nguyê? Alright. So I've heard a lot of people actually ask about this and just questioning why this. I'm sure a lot of people have this question. It's a pretty popular thing, and when people think of Vietnamese stuff or just Vietnamese people, I feel like this is the first name that they would think about, the Nguyê last name.
Yeah, that's true.
So, Yvonne, do you have any guesses as why there's so many Nguyês?
I've always wondered this as well when I was younger, but because I don't really know Vietnamese history that well, I just tend to believe that it stems from, I guess, the dynasty ruler's name carrying on to the citizens. That's how I would perceive it. But is there a more true reason, or am I on the right path?
Well, you're pretty much on the right path. It's somewhere around there, except it was almost the same thing happened so many times in history, and it was just it was a lot of people had to switch their last name. because of Dynasty's fall. So you were kind of correct there. So I guess I'll get to the actual explanation. So the reason why there's so many Nguyens, so actually, for those of you who don't know already, the Nguyen last name is actually the most common last name amongst the Vietnamese people, specifically to the Kinh ethnicity. So those that are known as just Vietnamese, not of any ethnic minorities, followed by Trần, Lê, Huỳnh or Hoàng, Phạm, Phang. And it's estimated that at the moment around the world, there's around 36 million individuals that have the Nguyen last name. So it's quite a lot of people, especially if you're in Vietnam, you could pretty much find a lot. You go outside, you find anybody with last name Nguyen. So how it started around 1,500 years ago is what people believe that the Nguyen clan from Hubei province in China. So they migrated to the southern regions of China, which is currently part of northern regions of Vietnam. So that's when they first introduced the last name to the locals within these southern regions at the time. So Nguyen is actually a Chinese last name, Yuan.
Oh,
There's a Chinese character for it.
that is
Yeah.
really interesting.
A lot of people don't know that. I think they assume that it's purely Vietnamese.
And growing up, I assume so too.
Oh.
I thought it was purely Vietnamese.
I think that's the thing with most Vietnamese last names. It's actually from a bit of like Chinese descent, but it's over time it's been turned into like Vietnamese. So basically, over the next nearly 1,000 years, as the dynasties continue to change, new dynasties came, new dynasties fell in China, more of these Nguyens from China migrated to the south in this region where it's modern day Vietnam. So fast forward a little bit more, in around 1232 AD, which is the end of the Lê dynasty. So at this time, Trần Cảnh forced Lý Chiêu Hoàng. So Lý Chiêu Hoàng is actually a really notable female figure in Vietnamese history. We have a post on her on our Instagram at VSAR. She was actually the last ruler of the Lê dynasty in Vietnam. As she was female, she was not able to carry on the last name or the dynasty in general. So when she married like a person from the Trần last name, the general at the time, Trần Thủ Độ, wanted to kind of remove the Lê dynasty influence from the entire region. So what he did was he actually ordered that all the Lês, especially of the royal family within that region, to change their last name to Nguyen or risk being killed.
Oh, wow. Very imperialistic movement, I see, which is very common in war.
I mean, yeah, it was like a common solution in the past, just to like kill people. Like, although
And
not very
and force them
ideal.
to adopt this new last name. I wonder like how people felt at the time. But I'm pretty sure like during this time Confucianism was like pretty big as a religion in Vietnam. I don't know, am I wrong? But I guess hierarchical like setting and stuff, it made it easy for people to like adopt the last name or else they would die. So yeah.
Yeah, I think it was a lot of things. It was about like honor and like carrying on the family name, and or just a matter of staying alive at that point. Because if they were able to stay alive, they'd be able to continue to take care of like their ancestors, like ancestral tablets and their graves,
Yeah.
and being able to pay their respects, which is a pretty big culture in Vietnam and also in Asia in general. So basically, today, actually in the region where the capital of the Lê dynasty used to be, there's very few Lê individuals, because historically, all these royal members of the Lê dynasty had already changed the last name to Nguyen.
Wow. That's true.
So like, yeah, you can't really find a lot in the region where the capital once was. So there's actually a little bit of like a side story to this. So I was reading around
Ooh.
and I saw that there's actually a Korean connection to the Lee Dynasty. I don't know if you know this. Did you hear about this before?
No, I've never heard about this actually.
So yeah, actually not a lot of people know about this. So right around the time of the fall of the Lee Dynasty, so Lê Long Tường, the son of King Lê An Tông, he basically this is like a theory, but people, some of it I'm pretty sure is partly true, but some of it might be kind of a theory. So at the time, there was really wide relations between the Ming Dynasty, Goryeo at the time, and the Lee Dynasty in Vietnam. Basically, Korea, China, Vietnam were really well connected with each other. So if you go back in history, you look at the clothes, it's kind of the same. And their culture as well. And as well as like their foreign connections with each other, it was pretty good. So at the time, it was Goryeo Dynasty in Korea. So the prince of the Lee Dynasty escaped to Korea. And here he helped fight off the Mongols, and the king of Goryeo at the time granted the prince like leadership of this area and kind of around the border of North and South Korea. It was called Hwasan, this area. So that's why I started the clan Lee or Lee Hwasan clan in Korea, which still exists to this day. And it was believed that the first president of South Korea, Lee Sung-man, was believed to be descendants of the Vietnamese Lee royal family.
Whoa.
So he was like the 27th generation of Lee Tai-to, the very first king of the Lee Dynasty.
That's so cool. Oh my gosh. And is this the theory, or like it's partly true, or because he is believed to be like a descendant of like the Vietnamese Lee dynasty?
It actually is true. So it's actually in the records of the Hwasan Lee clan. So actually, if you've in the Vietnamese news a few years back, the 31st generation descendant of Lee Tai-to still visited Vietnam to attend like the memorial services for like the annual Lee Ancestors Memorial Service. And I thought that was pretty interesting. Like, it was like a few hundred years ago. Like, how many? Almost 1,000 years ago.
If you think about it, it's pretty recent. Like, it's not really that far off, I don't think.
Oh, yeah, that's true. I would say 1200 AD. only a few hundred years back. So back to our main thing. So what do you think happened in the next few centuries? Like after you saw what happened to the Lee Dynasty, what do you think happened next?
Oh my gosh, well, if we're talking about why there's so many Lings, I'm pretty sure like the dynasty continued for like, I guess the ruling like last name continued for a long time until I guess another war. That's what I think probably happened.
Yeah, so like it was something similar to that. Basically, like I said earlier, whenever in Vietnamese history a dynasty collapsed and the previous dynasty's last name, like especially the royal family members, they would be like, okay, so you have an option. You're gonna change your last name to Nguyê or get killed. Really good bargain there. So, same thing happened in 1400 AD, when the Ho dynasty took power, and they killed many of the Jung family members when the Ho dynasty came into power. Like, it was a lot of people that they went out and they killed. And the Ho dynasty only lasted till 1407, so only 7 years. And in fear of revenge from the Jung family, they were just like, I'm gonna change all my last name to Nguyê because you can't recognize me. And after that, so we had one time in the Ho dynasty, and then after that, in 1592, the Mac dynasty fell, and out of fear of revenge from the Lê, they also changed the last name to Nguyê.
Oh my gosh, they just hiding behind the common last name now.
Yeah. It gets even more than that. So, once again, out of fear from the Nguyê family, so the descendants of the Jin lords also changed the last name to Nguyê.
It just keeps going.
Yeah, so right now we've had that happen 4 times already now. In the Lee, the Ho, the Mac, and the Jin period.
Oh my gosh, so it's just like these like, I don't know, to keep your identity a secret, only you and your basically other family members who have certain last names like Le or Jin, only you guys know that you guys are like Jin or Le, but everyone else you have to hide it.
Actually, that only
secret.
lasted for like, I would say,
Wow.
a generation or so. After that, they would.
Oh.
As
True. Yeah. They're just like,
most people now do like lots of Nguyings in Vietnam. It's believed that they actually weren't originally all Nguyings. Well, I'll get into that a bit later because there's a little bit part later. So basically, now we are in the 1800s. In the beginning of 1802, we begin the Nguyện Dynasty after the Taisung period, when the Nguyện lords came to power. And under the Nguyện Dynasty, obviously, there would be a lot of benefits for changing their last name to the king's last name, as it brought amongst the people lots of social benefits. So the Nguyện Dynasty from 1802 to 1883 was Nguyện on its own, and then from 1883 to 1945 it was under the French rule, but still the Nguyện Dynasty.
oh.
So there was this tradition.
Mm-hmm.
So if somebody did something to help the kingdom, or it's basically equivalent to being knighted in the Western world, their family would be honored with being able to carry the king's last name, which is interesting. So if this member did something really amazing, there's like, well, now your family gets to have the Nguyện last name. And I'm pretty sure a lot of people did this because there's so many Nguyens. And then during the Nguyện period, there was lots of social benefits, like I mentioned earlier. So there was better treatment as well as like just prosperity in general, as well as being able to avoid legal prosecution sometimes if they had the Nguyện last name. So some of the criminals actually changed their last names to Nguyện to avoid heavy penalties.
Well, if I was a criminal during that time, I would probably change my name as well. Like, if given this last name gives me, I guess, because it stems from like a, I don't know, like hierarchical setting already, so I might as well just try and save myself from, I don't know, getting killed again. Like, it's pretty serious back then too, like.
Yeah, it was pretty
just for any penalty. Yeah, it's very dramatic as well.
I feel like most of the times the punishment was like get killed.
Yeah, that is like any punishment. It sounds like throughout everything you just said so far, it's either you do this or die.
So now you probably think that this is like, oh, it's probably the end, right? Like, it's actually not. During the French era, in the latter half of the Nguyen Dynasty, a lot of the lower class Vietnamese actually did not have any last names at all. And the French people, wanting to kind of segment people and group them into different individual social classes, they ended up just giving people the dynasty's last name, because why not? So because of that, the very last blow in the beginning of the 20th century, a whole bunch of these new people were granted the last name Nguyen because they just didn't have a last name.
The last name like exponentially like grew so much because of the French being like, here you go. I'm gonna give you guys this last name, because you guys don't have last names, and this is so happened to be the dynasty that we're in, so here you go.
Yeah, so like that was the last blow. Now we're in present day with all these people with the Nguyen last name. So what did you think of this crazy kind of a roller coaster of dynasties falling and people getting the last name?
Obviously, like, we talk about this very briefly and whatnot, and obviously history is not linear, because, you know, we still see a lot of Nguyens and like different last names now, which is kind of crazy. Like, knowing this now, I think I'm like better educated on, I guess, where last names come from as well, because what was it, back in like elementary school, I would still get questions asking me about Nguyen last names, or as they would say, Nguyen, or, you know, Nguyen. They'd be like, oh, since you're Vietnamese, is the last name Nguyen due to like incest or whatnot like that? And being young, I'm just like, oh, I actually don't know, so I really can't give you guys an answer to your like question, even though the question I felt was like kind of insulting because they were talking to me in a certain type of tone. But yeah, knowing this now, I'm just like, no, people carry over last names because of royalty and the type of like social classes that had grouped people in back then in Vietnam. So it was cool.
Yeah, there's like
Very
a lot
educational.
of like interesting history behind it. I hope that our listeners slash viewers found it interesting too. But I think you actually brought up a really good topic, like just growing up, I think overseas in North America or wherever it may be outside of Asia, and having like either Nguyen as a last name or just like an Asian name or last name. I feel like there's a lot of things that came with that. Like what you mentioned already, like one of the experiences being that people would always question whenever they saw anybody with the same last name. Like, hey, you guys related? Are you this, are you that? When in reality, like you had no idea who this person was.
Yeah, I know. But like knowing different last names definitely helped like me growing up, just trying to find friends and stuff, because of course name is part of identity, and especially a last name like Nguyen. With Vietnamese culture in general, there's so much history involved, so I guess I found it easier to connect with people because I'm like, hey, you're Vietnamese, me too. Then you just like talk. I guess that's how I started making friends in class. When I saw like a Vietnamese last name or whatnot, just say hi and stuff.
Oh, I think that's a really good point. You kind of like go down the list. You're just like looking for the Nguyen last name or just Asian last names. You're just like, hey,
I
let's
know.
be friends.
Oh my gosh.
It's kind of creepy stalking people for the last name.
Okay, but when you're a child, like you're like, oh, what do you talk to like as when you're like 6 or 7? Oh, what mark did you get on your last homework? Like,
I don't think
no.
we had marks at homework at 6 years old.
Oh my gosh, yeah, that's true.
But like during like your experience, like I don't have the Nguyen last name. You don't have the Nguyen last name either. But I did know a lot of people who did have the Nguyen last name. And I found that for them, it was really your experience where a whole bunch of people question them. Hey, you related to the other Nguyen? You related to like, oh, Cindy Nguyen? Are you related to like Kevin Nguyen? Like, it was always like something like that. And people, I guess like they just didn't know any better at the time. But looking back at it, it was kind of annoying, I guess, having to explain all
Yeah.
this to people. Like, no, we're actually not related. I actually don't know this person. But at the time, nobody really knew why. They're just like, oh, we just know Wing. There's so many of us. We just don't know why.
Yeah, I know, for sure. Like, I can never experience like having the same last name as like with people with Nguyen. Of course, other people have my last name, but all my friends who have Nguyen last name, they could only reply with, "Well, it's just because we have the same last name," which I feel like could still like, carry over to like even Western last names, Smith. Like you guys probably aren't related, so I feel like if people can see it like that, it's still the same thing.
Yeah, I think with overseas, the thing was the last names were given to people based on their occupation. So Smith would be like a Jack Smith. And in like in Asia, it was
Oh.
based on family clans, so like ancestry and lineage, which is
Mhm.
why it was like the whole Confucius belief of carrying on the family last name.
Yeah.
Well, so back to us. What was like one of the things that I think you found hard growing up as like kind of like an Asian or in general or even just with the last name? Like I think we kind of already mentioned it. But I'd say, yeah, obviously people just looking at us like and questioning, oh, you guys are like related or not, or just being looked at differently, like, oh, you have an Asian last name. But I think it was actually not as bad for me because my legal name was my English name. So I know a lot of people actually have like full on like non-English names as their legal name and they use it in school too. So what is your opinion on giving your kids like non-Asian names or
Like
just
first names, right?
English names. Yeah.
Right. I don't really have a opinion on it. Like the only thing I understand, or like it makes me upset, only because, like if people were to name their kids like Vietnamese names and whatnot, and other people would pronounce it wrong, it does suck for the child because their name is being pronounced wrong. But I feel like that shouldn't deter you from naming your kid any Vietnamese or Asian name, only because if we are trying to like share culture and we live in like a Western society like me and you right now, we should try and, you know, educate other people on pronouncing it properly, even if they should try to learn as well. Or like I'm still trying to deal with that right now as well. Like, what is it? I call myself Yvonne Lee. Like Lee is not how it's pronounced. It's Le, right? So I still try to practice with that, even though like it's so much easier. Like all of my other friends who are like not born like in Canada or whatnot, who are from Vietnam, they tell me like they take upon like an English name, right? So they said that they take on an English name because it's hard to pronounce, and like I know the discourse is like, yeah, why would I like, was it show my name to others if it's hard to pronounce? So I'd rather take on like a English last name if I'm entering that type of society. But I don't know, it just like makes me feel bad that that's how it is. So I feel like we should practice just like sharing our like non-Western or non-Anglified names.
I think, yeah, you have a pretty good point there. But a lot of people, I know from my own experience, my parents actually didn't even give me an Asian legal name or even a middle name. When I asked them why, they were just like, because you're going to have a hard time filling out forms and people won't be able to pronounce your name and you're going to have a hard life. Which I think is,
yeah,
I don't know, it's kind of sad in some way where like you've lost your heritage in partly because now you're just afraid of other people's. And that way you're kind of like cutting yourself away from a bit of your own culture. Which is the experience I find for like you mentioned with the international students, before they come over here, most of them or a number of them typically make an English name, and so that when they come over here, it's not specifically for Vietnamese, like just in general, just any non-English individual, they would change their first name to make it easier for others to pronounce, but I feel like it's almost kind of sad, like it's your identity, it's who you are, and you're changing
I
it.
know, that's what I mean. Like, was it? I still don't mind people saying my last name wrong or like pronouncing things wrong. Like, obviously, like the approach is what's important, right? Like, if as long as they're trying, but I can't really speak much on it because I was born with the name Yvonne. Obviously, it's a very westernized name, so I can't have the same experience as someone with a Vietnamese name. But I know there are people who try to pronounce the names properly, and I honestly think it's important to let them try and not like be very offended when they get it wrong, you know?
Yeah, I think I heard that from quite a lot of people. Like, some of my teachers, I remember when somebody asks, or whenever they ask, they're like, well, how do I pronounce your name? When they ask a person who didn't have an English name, the person would be like, oh, it's okay, you could just call me, like, whatever you want, or they would say, like, a short form, and the teacher would be really insistent, like, no, tell me how you say your name. It's you. You shouldn't have to change it for other people. You should be proud of your name. Your parents gave it to you. You should keep it the way it was, and don't try to change it. It's yourself. You shouldn't change yourself for other people's like convenience.
Wow, those are nice teachers. They're pretty woke. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I was like, I think this was in like high school. And so at the time there was like much more. Well, I guess maybe it was where I lived too. There was a lot more diversity in terms of the population and just the demographic in general. You had a lot of people that were not of Western descent.
Yeah.
And I think that's really interesting because a lot of I know my cousins, they grow up and they didn't really care about the culture sometimes. They grew up over here and then they realize, oh, once they're older, they actually don't know anything about or don't know a lot about the culture, and now they're kind of having an identity crisis. And this is what I kind of saw on just social media. Like a lot of people, like the first generation of the Asian immigrants I saw specifically, they were always saying, oh, what about this culture? And having different questions like, why do we do this? Why do we do that? Which is kind of where the inspiration for this entire podcast came from. But also staying connected to your Vietnamese culture or just your heritage in general. So like, do you think that there's like any ways that you personally stay connected with the Vietnamese culture?
Of course, like, for me personally, like, I think, what was it? I grew up eating Vietnamese food. I have a immigrant mother who mainly speaks Vietnamese, so that's the only form of communication with her for me. And I know a lot of kids are probably like this as well. So I usually, growing up, I did not really appreciate being Vietnamese often just because of like classes reasons and whatnot. But I came to like really accept my culture, especially in high school, just making more friends who were more related to me in terms of like making more Vietnamese friends and whatnot, and just like talking about issues we had together. I think that's how like you stay connected to your culture, just like having the same or storytelling, I would say, like sharing your stories with other people who also go through the same experiences as you definitely like will help you connect more with the culture that you feel disconnected to. Because I know a lot of kids now, like, if it's hard because if you're not in the environment where you can meet like Vietnamese people, of course you're not gonna be able to connect to Vietnamese culture or your heritage at all. And it's also like depends on the people who raise you as well. Like I know a lot of parents who don't really talk to their children in Vietnamese or like talk about Vietnamese culture at all to their children. And it's not that they're at fault or whatnot, obviously. Like there's a lot of things that go into like raising children. So I feel like education is probably like the biggest way people can stay connected. And just like since we are such like a media driven generation, I feel like this podcast, for example, or like other let's say like even memes help people stay connected. I'm like being serious.
Yeah, like memes.
Like Vietnamese memes. Yeah, for real. Like they help you ponder questions like, oh yeah, like I can relate to this, even though it could be so corny. It's like, oh wow, I didn't know this was like distinctly Vietnamese or whatnot. I think that's like how people can really stay connected. Just like communication, media, visual culture.
I think it's really easy now, especially with like Facebook groups like subtle Asian traits, subtle Viet traits. Like I see like a lot of people, they're just like, oh, I didn't have any Asian friends, I didn't have any Viet friends before I joined this group, and I was able to learn so much more and reconnect with the culture. And that's where like these questions like popped up, like, why do so many Vietnamese have the last name Nguyen?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Even though like you can look at it and be like, oh, this is so corny or whatnot, but it's like so still like they're still helping like connect people, and that's what, I don't know, sharing cultures. So it's cool.
So like I said before,
See that.
like that was the whole point of starting this podcast, in hopes that one way or another that we're able to kind of like reconnect people to a bit of their heritage a bit more so that they can understand a different perspective of it, in a way that's more interesting. If you were listening all the way to this point, I hope I didn't bore you out or you found it interesting. Let us know your suggestions, anything. We are still working on this. We're dedicated to make it really good. Oftentimes I find that we don't really realize where the things in our lives came to be or how they even came from, specifically when it comes to things of our cultural heritage. And it's only when we take a moment to ask, why are you doing this? Why do we do that? Do you really have this opportunity to learn and unveil so much more about your heritage? And I hope that you guys found this interesting and you were able to learn something new, or even if it wasn't something new, you had like an interesting podcast to put on while you were washing your dishes or doing the laundry so that your parents don't yell at you because we're all at home now. So yeah, I hope that this was able to connect you somehow in one way or another. And always, we're working forward to continue to spread the culture of Vietnam or just Asian culture in general, through our cultural posts and through our blogs and through our social media. If you want to check it out, it's at Instagram at VSAR. We also have a website and a Facebook too. Hopefully we'll be able to link it somewhere. I think if there's a comment section, if this is in the video form, then leave us a suggestion. What questions do you have for Why Do Vietnamese? It could be anything you could think about. Why do Vietnamese do this? Why do Vietnamese do that? Just let us know and we'll try to do it, and hopefully we'll be able to really bring out really interesting perspectives and new sights on things. And this part would be where we would thank our sponsors for sponsoring our podcasts, but we don't have any yet. So any potential sponsors out there, if you're willing to sponsor us, please let us know. This would be where I would share it.
Yes. Please email me and I will get back to you
Yes, please email
guys.
our financial director, Yvonne Lay. Let's pronounce it right. So as always, I guess this brings us to the end of our very first episode of Why Do Vietnamese. I hope everybody enjoyed it. Yvonne, do you have any last words to say?
Yes. Everything Brian said, and up to now, if you guys did not hear it, TLDR, take the last name Nguyê or die. That is basically why.
Yeah, so thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you next time on Why Do Vietnamese?
Why are there different accents in the regions of Vietnam?
Why do Vietnamese have 2 wedding ceremonies?
Why do Vietnamese have French words?
Why is Vietnamese in Latin script?
Why do Vietnamese ride motorbikes?
You're listening to Why Do Vietnamese, a cultural podcast by VSAR.